By midday, his skin had already gone red across the shoulders, tight and warm in a way that had nothing to do with the heat itself. He had no idea what was actually happening to his own body, only that it hurt more the longer he stayed under the open sun. What happened to ancient humans exposed to the sun day after day, year after year, shaped far more about their survival than most people ever consider, and by the end of this, you will understand why sun exposure quietly became one of the most important factors in where early humans could actually live. Stay through this one, because the real answer connects directly to something still visible on every human being alive today. To understand sunburn in ancient humans, you first have to understand what skin actually does when exposed to strong sunlight. Ultraviolet radiation from the sun can damage skin cells directly, and the human body's main defense against this damage is a pigment called melanin, which absorbs and scatters some of that radiation before it reaches deeper layers of skin. The amount of melanin naturally present in someone's skin determines how much natural protection he has against sun damage, and this amount varied significantly among early human populations, depending on where they lived. Early humans originating in regions near the equator, where sunlight was intense and consistent throughout the year, generally had skin with higher natural melanin levels, providing much stronger built-in protection against sunburn and related skin damage. This was not something anyone deliberately chose. It developed gradually across many generations, as individuals with more protective skin simply survived and reproduced more successfully in high sun environments than those with less protection. Ancient humans who migrated to regions farther from the equator faced a very different situation entirely. As groups moved into areas with less intense, more seasonal sunlight, having very high melanin levels actually became a disadvantage in one specific way. Vitamin D, which the body produces using sunlight exposure on skin, became harder to generate in these lower sunlight environments, especially if skin still carried protection levels suited to much stronger equatorial sun. Over many generations, populations in these regions gradually developed lower natural melanin levels, allowing more efficient vitamin D production, even with weaker available sunlight. This means sunburn itself was not experienced equally across all ancient humans. Someone with skin adapted to intense, consistent sun exposure could spend significant time outdoors with relatively little risk of burning. Someone whose ancestors had adapted to a much cloudier, lower sunlight environment, if suddenly exposed to intense sun for extended periods, likely burned far more easily and severely, since his skin had not developed the same level of natural protection. Now think about this for a moment. If your ancestors had lived for countless generations in a region with mild, inconsistent sunlight, and you suddenly found yourself needing to travel or hunt for hours under an intensely bright, unfamiliar sun, what do you think your body's first reaction would actually be? Would the discomfort set in gradually? Would it hit you faster than you expected? Leave your answer below, because how people imagine their own skin reacting here often connects to something they have actually experienced themselves. Sunburn itself, once it happened, created genuine practical problems for ancient humans beyond simple discomfort. Damaged skin lost some of its ability to regulate body temperature effectively, meaning a severely sunburned individual could struggle more with maintaining stable body heat during cooler nights. Blistering or peeling skin also created a higher risk of infection, a serious concern in an environment without any modern wound care, antiseptics, or antibiotics available if a burn became infected. Ancient humans appear to have developed practical, if imperfect, methods for reducing sun exposure and managing its effects. Simple shade-seeking behavior, timing outdoor activity around the coolest and least intense parts of the day, and using available materials for basic coverage all likely played a role. Some evidence suggests certain groups applied natural substances, like clay mud, or specific plant extracts to exposed skin, possibly providing some limited physical barrier against direct sun exposure. Even without any scientific understanding of ultraviolet radiation itself, there is a physical detail about sunburn that rarely gets mentioned. and it changes how ancient humans likely experienced the entire process. The visible redness and discomfort of a sunburn does not appear immediately upon exposure. It typically develops over several hours, meaning an ancient human could spend an entire day of hunting, gathering, or traveling under intense sun without feeling significant discomfort in the moment, only to experience the full effects of serious skin damage well after the activity had ended, and there was little he could do to prevent it retroactively. This delayed reaction likely made sunburn a particularly difficult danger to learn from directly, since the exact moment of overexposure rarely lined up with the moment the consequences actually became apparent. Different body areas also carried very different levels of natural exposure risk, based purely on posture and daily activity. Shoulders, the back of the neck, and the top of the head received far more direct, consistent sun exposure during standing activities like walking, hunting, or gathering compared to areas naturally shaded by the body's own posture. Ancient humans likely experienced sunburn unevenly across their bodies for this exact reason, with certain areas showing far more consistent damage over a lifetime, simply due to their constant exposure during ordinary daily movement. Water exposure created a particularly deceptive risk that likely caught many ancient humans off guard. Spending time in or near water on a hot day often feels cooling and comfortable, potentially masking how much cumulative sun exposure was actually occurring during that time. Combined with the earlier point about reflective surfaces amplifying exposure near open water, this meant time spent swimming, fishing, or resting near a lake or river on a clear day may have produced significantly more sun damage than the same amount of time spent in a shaded forest environment, despite feeling far more comfortable in the moment. Diet and overall health likely influenced how severely an individual's skin reacted to sun exposure as well, though ancient humans would have had no way to understand this connection scientifically. Certain nutritional deficiencies can make skin more vulnerable to damage from ultraviolet exposure, meaning periods of food scarcity or poor nutrition may have coincided with increased sunburn severity and slower healing, compounding one survival challenge with another during already difficult periods for a group. If this part surprised you, that skin protection itself varied so dramatically based purely on ancestral geography, that is worth sitting with for a moment, because it shows how deeply environment shaped human biology over enormous stretches of time. Long before anyone understood why any of it was actually happening, clothing played a more significant role in sun protection than people often assume, though its purpose was rarely understood in those specific terms. Ancient humans living in intensely sunny, open environments likely developed simple coverings partly out of comfort, reducing the harsh sensation of direct sun on exposed skin during long hours of activity. Even without any conscious framework connecting this to long-term skin damage or cancer risk in the way modern understanding does today, seasonal changes created another layer of complexity for ancient humans living farther from the equator. A body adapted to low winter sunlight could still be caught off guard by intense summer sun, particularly during the transition between seasons when skin had not yet built up whatever gradual, limited adaptive response it was capable of producing. This meant even populations with generally lower baseline sun exposure could experience real sunburn risk during specific times of year, especially if unusually clear weather or extended outdoor activity coincided with the sun's strongest seasonal angle. Altitude added yet another variable that ancient humans in mountainous regions had to contend with. Higher elevations generally receive more intense ultraviolet exposure due to thinner atmosphere filtering less radiation, meaning ancient humans living or traveling through high mountain regions faced genuinely greater sunburn risk than those at lower elevations, even under similar-looking weather conditions. Groups with generational experience in mountainous terrain likely developed a stronger instinctive caution around prolonged sun exposure during clear, high-altitude days specifically because of this heightened risk. Reflective surfaces created a danger that had nothing to do with direct sun angle at all. Ancient humans traveling across snow, sand, or calm open water faced amplified ultraviolet exposure from light reflecting upward off these surfaces, effectively receiving sun exposure from multiple directions simultaneously rather than just from directly overhead. This likely explains why certain environments, deserts and snow-covered regions in particular, may have produced especially severe and rapid sunburn cases compared to forested or shaded terrain with similar overhead sun intensity. Long-term sun exposure created consequences that extended well beyond simple burns, though ancient humans had no framework for understanding this connection at the time. Repeated skin damage across a lifetime likely contributed to visible skin aging and increased risk of more serious skin conditions later in life, particularly among individuals whose ancestral skin adaptation did not match the sun intensity of wherever they actually lived. This slow, cumulative damage would have been essentially invisible in its early stages, making it very different from the immediate, obvious discomfort of an acute sunburn. There is one more detail worth mentioning before we close. Ancient humans who understood, even informally, when and how to limit sun exposure for themselves and their group likely reduced real, ongoing suffering across many years. A quiet form of practical knowledge that had nothing to do with strength or speed, but mattered just as much over a lifetime. The variation in human skin tone seen across the world today is, at its core, a direct visible record of countless generations of ancestors adapting to the specific sunlight conditions of wherever they lived. Every shade of human skin represents a genuinely successful survival adaptation to a particular environment, built entirely through the same slow, generational process that shaped nearly every other physical trait ancient humans passed down to us. So the next time you get a sunburn after spending too long outside, remember that the basic mechanism behind that reaction connects directly back to survival pressures your ancestors faced long before recorded history began. Skin adapted to intense equatorial sun-protected people in ways cloudier climates never demanded, while lighter skin adapted elsewhere for entirely different survival reasons related to producing enough vitamin D in weaker sunlight, and in many cases. That same basic biological trade-off is still visible on your own skin right now. If this kind of detail is exactly what you come here for, this channel is built entirely around real questions like this, the specific biological and survival details that never make it into the usual retelling of ancient human life, the small adaptations that actually shaped how humans spread across the entire planet. And staying around means you will not miss the next one.